Seb Fry, a real estate broker in Northern California. I primarily serve the counties of Santa Cruz, Santa Clara, and Monterey. Welcome to module number 7 of the SellForSure University. In this module of the SellForSure University, we take a good hard look at negotiating an offer and closing the sale. We take you through the process of reviewing and negotiating an offer, the buyer's due diligence, appraisal, closing costs, taxes, and much more. Most home sales in California use a standard residential purchase agreement provided by the California Association of Realtors. It's a 10-page document and has a number of important provisions in it. Regardless of what purchase agreement is used, all purchase agreements include the following elements. Purchase price. This is the total amount to be paid for the property, but keep reading. The buyer may ask for costly concessions. Earnest money deposit. This is the buyer's initial deposit, which shows that they are serious buyers. The initial earnest money deposit is usually fully refundable until the buyer releases all their contingencies for the purchase. Length of escrow. This is the number of days after acceptance or a specific date upon which the sale of the property will close. Length of contingency period or due diligence. This is the number of days the buyer has to complete their due diligence and finalize their financing with their lender. An inspection contingency is usually 7 to 17 days, and a loan contingency is typically between 17 and 21 days. The allocation of costs, that is, who pays for what and in what proportion. The language of the purchase agreement should include language that specifies the property is to be sold as is, and that the seller will not be required to make any repairs or issue credits or reduce the price for any reason whatsoever. The purchase agreement will also include language in the fine print about the seller's right to cancel, which, by the way, the seller typically does not have any right to cancel the contract unless the buyer fails to perform as the contract requires. And of course, there's a lot of fine print. The standard purchase agreement is 10 pages long and has a number of important terms and conditions. I've developed an explanation of the standard California purchase agreement, and it is included in the resources section of the SellForSure website. When you hear that an offer is coming in, ask the buyer to include a personal letter along with the offer. You want to see if you can find out who the buyer is, what their jobs are, what their situation is, and that is, why they are motivated to buy your property in particular. Once you've received an offer, you must carefully read the terms and conditions and then evaluate if the offer meets your needs. Pay particular attention to any concessions the buyer may be asking for, such as help with closing costs and what personal property may be included in the offer. Before considering your buyer's offer, make sure they're a credible buyer. Any offer should be accompanied by a pre-approval letter or proof of funds if it's a cash offer. If they haven't provided either, set aside the offer until they do. If they provided a pre-approval letter, make sure that it's a real pre-approval and not a simple pre-qualification, and that the lender is a reputable and preferably local lender in your market. If the funds are cash, make sure the funds are in a U.S. bank, not a foreign institution. Any offer you receive should be taken in the context of the overall level of interest in your home. If you have been on the market only a short period of time and have received an offer, you've probably also had significant interest as well from the public, and maybe certain specific other buyers are also considering making an offer. If there are other buyers, make sure that they know you've received an offer. If you've been in the market a while and you've received just a single offer on your property, I advise you to be as accommodating as possible. While your first offer may not be the best offer you'll ever get, in some cases it will be. Don't lose the buyers. When you get an offer, you have 3 basic choices: to accept, reject, or counter. My feeling is that there isn't an offer so good that it doesn't deserve a counter offer. If nothing else, it sets the tone for the transaction that says you're paying attention to the details. Don't lose your buyer over a minor sticking point. Keep your eye on the goal. That's getting your home sold. If you have done a good job preparing your home for sale by putting together a complete disclosure package and pricing your home competitively, you should get offers within a week or 2 of listing your home for sale. Even so, it's possible that you will receive an offer which is quite a bit less than you're expecting to see. If a buyer's offer is low, even a little bit low, make sure that the buyer sees the value in your home. If a buyer's offer is low, even a little bit low, make sure that the buyer sees the value in your home. Have good comparable sales you can point to which show its value. Make sure they understand your home's features and the benefits that these features provide them. Another thing to consider carefully is the terms of the sale. If the buyer wants to offer less than asking, how about they provide you with some great terms? For example, a 100% cash offer, or shortening the inspection period, or giving you a free rent back for a month so you can find a new place to live with a lot less time pressure. Remember too that it never hurts to throw the dog a bone. For example, you can offer the buyer a 1-year home warranty or to pay a year of the HOA dues for them. Just making some concession can help the buyer feel better about paying a lot more for your home than they want to. If you have a buyer on the hook, it's best to keep negotiating until you have a deal that meets with your approval. When you make a counteroffer to a buyer, it doesn't lock you into working with that buyer. If another offer comes along from another buyer, you are still free to work with any other buyer that there might be out there. Here are a few top negotiation tactics that I like to use, which I found very effective over the years. When presented with an offer from a buyer, remember that it's unusual for a buyer's first offer to be their absolute best offer. I always say it's rare an offer is so great it can't possibly be improved upon. When you make an offer, the default verbiage gives the buyer 3 days to respond. Consider shortening that up to install a sense of urgency in the buyer. The use of a limited time offer is a well-worn marketing technique, and it can be effective in real estate negotiations as well. Have some comps around which appear to offer less value than your house does, but which the price is higher or at least equal to what you are asking. If the market is appreciating, make sure the buyer knows what exactly is going on in the market right now. Make sure they know how much prices are appreciating, how quickly homes are selling, and in particular, how many homes sell at or over asking price. Make sure they understand that they are getting a solid deal. Make sure they know that there is a lot of interest from buyers right now and they don't want to lose out on your home. Make sure they understand the kind of traffic you're seeing at the open houses, the number of agents who call and inquire about writing offers. Make sure they understand that your home is a hot commodity and it won't be around long. This last tactic comes into play after you're in contract. The appraisal is not normally given to the seller as it is the buyer's exclusive property. If the buyer is attempting to renegotiate the deal in any way and the appraisal has already been performed, get a copy. There might be some good ammunition in there for you. For example, the property may have appraised higher than contract price. Or the appraiser could note that the property is in generally good condition as compared to the comparables, and this when your buyer is trying to tell you it's a dump. Another thing is that the value derived using the income or the cost approach may be significantly higher than the sales comparison approach, and that's good ammunition to show your buyer that, hey, looking at it another way, the value of your property actually is considerably higher than it might first appear. What kind of concessions do homeowners typically offer buyers to sweeten the deal, or at least keep it from going completely sour? In the Western region, the answer to that is that 74% of sellers offered nothing at all in 2013. However, a home warranty was the single most popular concession, followed by closing costs, repair credits, and then some kind of personal property, for example, a flat screen TV, vehicle, or furniture. Your buyer will have some period of time, typically lasting between 1 and 3 weeks, to do their due diligence on the property. It is their right and duty. In fact, the buyer may go ahead and redo the same inspections which you, the homeowner, provided for them in the disclosure package. They want to make really sure they know what they're getting into. If any inspection report, yours or the buyer's, indicate that work is to be done on the property, expect that the buyer will get bids to have that work repaired as part of their due diligence. For this reason, it is important for you as a seller to have already obtained bids for any repairs which a buyer might reasonably ask for, and turn those bids over to the buyer as part of the disclosure package. If you don't, you open yourself up to the possibility of the buyer renegotiating over any repair bids. Your buyer will have some period of time, typically lasting between 1 and 3 weeks, to do their due diligence on the property. It is their right and their duty. In fact, the buyer may go ahead and redo the very same inspections which you, the homeowner, provided for them in the disclosure package. They'll want to make really sure they know what they're getting into. If any inspection reports, yours or the buyer's, indicate that work is to be done on the property, expect that the buyer will get bids to have that work repaired as part of their due diligence. For this reason, it is important for you as a seller to have already obtained bids for any repairs which a buyer might reasonably ask for, and turn those bids over to the buyer as part of the disclosure package. If you don't, you open yourself up to the possibility of the buyer renegotiating over any repair bids. The buyer cannot do any destructive inspections. They cannot cut into drywall or stucco, remove shingles, or anything that would require a repair afterward. The buyer may request that such an inspection be performed, but this would require specific written permission from the homeowner and can be denied. The buyer is also required to give all copies of inspection reports and repair bids to the seller, free of charge. Unless the standard contract is modified, the buyer cannot withhold these from the seller. Any and all inspection reports and bids provided by the buyer must be added to the seller's disclosure package. In the event that the deal should fall apart, the buyer's inspection reports and bids must be made available to all subsequent buyers or prospective buyers, as these would now be considered material facts about the property. A lot needs to happen once you and the buyer have signed a purchase agreement. A typical agreement specifies a 30-day escrow, which may seem like a lot of time, but it will fly quickly. Within 3 days of going under contract, the buyer will need to deposit their earnest money into escrow. Within the first 2 weeks or so, the buyer will be performing their due diligence and completing a number of inspections on the property. If you have taken the time to create a full disclosure package, you can often negotiate a shorter due diligence period, but you should not waive it completely. As a minimum, we recommend giving the buyer at least a week to do their own due diligence, regardless of how well prepared your disclosure package is. Usually during the first week, the buyer's lender will order an appraisal on your home, again, regardless of if you've already done an appraisal. Once the buyer's inspections are complete and the reappraisal report is in to the lender's underwriting department, the deal will firm up or fall apart. The appraisal may come in low or may be subject to some repairs. The buyer may also request that some repairs be made or ask for a credit or a price reduction, but the seller is usually under no requirement to make any repairs, credits, or reductions. At the end of the buyer's inspection period and loan and appraisal contingency, the buyer will either agree to release all the contingencies for the purchase or move to cancel the contract. The next milestone is the buyer's lender will draw loan documents for the buyer to sign. The title company will also create some documents for both the buyer and seller to sign as well. You will need to make an appointment with the escrow officer to come in and sign the grant deed and other paperwork. Around day 29, the buyer's loan will fund and the money will transfer from the buyer's lender's account to the escrow account. Once the loan has funded, the escrow account will release the grant deed to be recorded down at the county recorder's office the next morning. And on day 30, the deal will close. You will no longer be the owner of your home. No matter how carefully you have prepared your home or how carefully you have vetted the buyer, it is possible that there will be a delay in the closing of a sale. Actually, it's common. I don't have any numbers available, but in my experience, more than half of real estate transactions close late. Usually it's just a few days, but some delays can drag on for a week or two or more. When closing delays happen, they are most usually due to problems with the buyer's financing. The lending process is incredibly complicated and has become only more so after the 2008 subprime mortgage collapse. A brief delay caused by the time it takes to secure the buyer's financing is almost to be expected. If the buyer is even a day late to release a contingency or to close escrow, the seller may issue the buyer a notice to perform or demand to close escrow. After the seller issues that kind of notice or demand, the seller can then unilaterally cancel the contract if the buyer fails to perform as specified in the contract. The standard purchase agreement does not give the seller any remedy for a buyer's closing delays. There's no language which allows the seller to, for example, charge the buyer a per diem fee for late closing. In fact, with current lending laws, any change in the buyer's closing costs require a redisclosure to the buyer and will only further delay closing. Most buyers will be using some form of financing, and virtually all forms of financing will require that an appraisal be done, even if you, the seller, paid for an appraisal prior to putting your home on the market. The appraiser will be given a copy of the purchase agreement so they know what price they can't come in below without risking the deal falling apart. Really, the appraiser will try, if at all possible, to validate the contract price using recent comparable sales in the area and similar currently listed homes. Unless there is no way to support the value of the contract price, the appraisal will typically come in at or slightly above the sales price. Sometimes it will come in a healthy margin above the sales price, but this doesn't happen too often. In the event that the property appraises below the contract price, the buyer will typically have the right to cancel the sale. More commonly, the buyer will try to renegotiate the sale price to get the seller down to the appraised value. The seller is under no obligation to do this. However, many sellers will in fact lower the contract price in order to keep the deal together. The appraiser may also note that the value given to the property is subject to certain repairs being made. If the buyer's lender ends up requiring repairs, the seller is not obligated to make such repairs. The seller can insist that the buyer make or pay for those repairs, and this too is an item to be negotiated. The appraiser will check to make sure that smoke and carbon monoxide detectors have been installed, and if not, the appraiser is supposed to come back and verify that they have been, which can delay the buyer's financing. Make sure you have the required smoke and carbon monoxide detectors installed before the appraiser gets there. 88% of home buyers finance their recent home purchase. Among those who financed their home purchase, buyers typically financed 90%. That's from the 2013 profile of home buyers and sellers. Before I talk about taxes, I need to issue a disclaimer. I am not a tax professional, and before you make any decisions about buying or selling real estate, you ought to talk to your tax guy. Now that we have that out of the way, let's talk taxes. Even if you make a profit by selling your home, you may not have to pay any income or capital gains tax on that profit. Current tax law says that if you've made less than $500,000 in profit for married couples or $250,000 in profit for single individuals, you may not owe any income or capital gains tax. In order to avoid paying taxes on the profit of your home sale, you must also meet the following conditions. You must have owned the home for at least 2 years. The home must be your primary residence for 2 of the past 5 years. And you cannot have excluded profit from the sale of another house within the past 2 years. Pretty easy, right? It's one of the greatest tax loopholes available to the American middle class. While we are on the subject of taxes, I'm going to briefly mention 1031 tax-deferred exchanges. The usual disclaimer applies. I'm not an accountant, so please check with your accountant before planning to do a tax-deferred exchange. With a 1031 exchange, it may be possible for you to sell a property and defer paying taxes on any gain. A 1031 tax-deferred exchange allows you to sell an investment property and then buy or exchange it for another investment properties. The properties need to be like kind, that is, both must be real estate, but you can, for example, sell a condominium and buy a farm, or sell a gas station and buy a duplex. The property you are selling must be a property held for investment purposes. It cannot be a home you claim on your taxes as your primary residence. It may have been your residence in the past, but should not be noted as such on your current or previous tax return. When doing a 1031 exchange, you must disclose to the buyer that you are doing this exchange, as it does technically require the buyer's cooperation with a signature on a form or two. However, for practical purposes, the fact that you're doing a 1031 exchange does not affect the buyer in any material way. The tricky part in doing a 1031 exchange is that you must accomplish the transaction within strict time requirements. Within 45 days of the sale of your property, you must identify one or more replacement properties which you will be exchanging into, and within 6 months of the sale of your property, you must have completed the purchase of the replacement properties. If you fail to meet the requirements, your 1031 exchange is invalid and you will need to pay tax on the gains. There's a lot more to 1031 exchanges than this, so again, talk to your tax accountant, but do keep them in mind, as a 1031 exchange is the sensible way to sell one and then buy another investment property. The bulk of the money you will spend selling your home will be incurred upon the sale of your home, which means these expenses are not out of pocket, but rather are usually paid for from the proceeds of the sale. They include title and escrow fees, taxes, if any, paying off your loan for an existing mortgage or liens, and your real estate agent's commission, and any concessions granted to the buyer, for example, closing costs or a home warranty for the buyer. All of these costs can be fairly easily calculated before you put your home on the market, with the exception of concessions made to the buyer, which could run from 0 to up about 3% of the purchase price. If you want to evaluate scenarios ahead of time, you may find it helpful to run the numbers through a spreadsheet. I have prepared an Excel spreadsheet called the Seller's Estimated Net, which you can download from the SellForSure.com website in the resources section. That's it. That completes Module 7. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for Module 8.